everybody, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Linda.
And welcome to the Paranormal Pub Table, where we talk about the paranormal at a pub table. Now, this week's question of the week is one that we get very often.
Mm-hmm.
Do Ouija boards actually work?
Oh.
Okay, now this is an interesting thing because when Ouija boards were created, they were created as a parlor trick. So the theory behind it was kind of a game, a board with, it has numbers and it has letters on it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure most of us are probably familiar. We've seen one at one point in time.
Right.
The man that created it.
Mm-hmm. This was a businessman named Ouija Bond, and he created the board based upon a previous invention called a talking board. But he added the letters and everything, and he actually filed for a patent in 1890, I believe May, and it wasn't until 1891 or so that he was able to get the patent for it.
So if you think about this as simply a parlor trick,
Mm-hmm.
they would say initially that it doesn't work unless you have multiple people touching the planchette.
Right.
Now, the planchette, that's that little plastic piece that goes on it that has a little window.
Yes, kind of teardrop shaped.
Yeah, the
usually.
magic eye, as some
Yeah.
have called it. And if you think about that, a lot of people are having their hands on this.
Mm-hmm.
And you're asking a question, thinking about an answer. Everyone is thinking about their own answer.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Usually not the same answer, I wouldn't think.
I wouldn't think so
In
either.
certain instances, yes.
But then the planchette will start to move.
Mm-hmm.
So even if somebody says, hey, I'm not moving it,
Right.
they may really think that. They may really believe that. But perhaps there's something in their subconscious. They're thinking of Uncle Dan or somebody like that.
Uncle Dan.
Uncle Dan. So they're moving this planchette subconsciously to spell out Uncle Dan.
Uncle Dan.
And some of the other people, perhaps their subconscious isn't as powerful.
Right.
They're not thinking anything particular. Some of them are clearing their minds. Or the first person that starts to move it, they just kind of go with the flow.
Yes.
And they don't realize that somebody is moving this, not on purpose, but
Right.
of their subconscious. And they're going along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems that this board, this Ouija board,
Yeah.
has had a lot more paranormal activity attached to it for something that is simply a parlor trick.
Absolutely.
There have been several cases that we've had where it started out with somebody saying, I messed with an Ouija board.
Right.
And that's when this started. And it's usually not pleasant activity that's associated with it. When people report activity that's based upon them using an Ouija board, or it started around that, it's very unpleasant. It usually involves people being scratched. A lot of people that I've talked to have said, I've had trouble getting rid of this board. One person even said, look, I put this board under my bed, and I woke up with something scratching me in the middle of the night, and I had all these scratches on my back. So the next day, what I did is I threw that board in the trash can. Well, sure enough, a few nights later, it was right back under their bed.
Oh, yeah.
Much more than a parlor trick, perhaps.
Yes, definitely. And this is one of those cases where you have something that's supposed to be, at least in the era that I was raised in, it was meant to be a game. You know, this is something that's put out by, what is it, Hasbro or Milton Bradley?
Parker Brothers.
Parker Brothers, okay.
Yeah.
And you can buy them in any Toys R Us. We don't recommend that you go do that, of course. But, I certainly had one when I was a kid. I played with them when I was a kid because it was promoted as a child's toy. It was promoted as something that would, entertain kids.
Yeah, I remember the commercials that said it's only a game.
Yeah, it's
Or
not.
is it?
It's not only.
And then it
a
had
game.
or is it with the question mark come up
Yeah.
afterwards.
No, this is definitely something that can cause a lot of problems. And the reason being because I think that it has something to do with the fact that you're channeling. The people who actually have their fingers on the planchette are, in a sense, channeling. And that's kind of one of those things that we've decided is the major problem with trying to communicate with spirits. Anytime that you're trying to communicate, if you're just sitting there using a digital voice recorder, or you're using some sort of other device that we use in paranormal investigation, you are not necessarily channeling something.
Right.
But when you begin to channel something or to allow something to come through using your body's own energy, and that seems to be what this is, that's where you're creating a recipe for disaster.
Yes, because a lot of people have said, they've argued and they've said, look, using a spirit box is the same thing as using an Ouija board.
Right.
And
It's
a spirit
not.
box, for those of you that may not be aware, it's basically a radio. And it scans through different stations, AM or FM, whatever you have it set through. It'll scan through at different speeds, whatever you set it through. And the theory is that spirits can communicate through the radio frequencies.
Right.
Now, the difference between this and an Ouija board is that if you activate, and this is why I say it's not the same, if you activate a spirit box and you start asking questions and there are no spirits around, they're not going to communicate with you.
That's right.
It's simply a diagnostic device. Are there spirits here or not? Now, an Ouija board is actually designed to summon spirits.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Because they even say it's very dangerous if you don't close it out when you're done, if you don't scroll across the goodbye, because it leaves it open.
Right.
So the difference between seeing if a spirit is there and summoning a spirit is quite possibly the difference between opening a doorway
Exactly.
or
yes.
not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And and like you say, they say to scroll across the goodbye. I don't necessarily believe that is the end result. And the reason I say that, I'm kind of skeptical about it. Who originally came up with that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's not something that's proven. It's not something that you can say for sure that has, trapped this demon back in the board or whatever it may be. Who originally came up with that? It sounds to me like people say that to make it sound more safe and to make it sound better to use the Ouija board. Oh, well, all you have to do is go and scroll through goodbye or go to the goodbye when you're done using it.
Right, but that doesn't matter because if you let a killer into your house and you close the door behind him, he's already in your house.
That's exactly right.
And
yes.
here's the thing with the Ouija boards. Now when people think of doorways being opened, they'll think that perhaps just using this board is going to open an invisible doorway that will let spirits come through and demons and whatever else.
Yes.
Now think of it in this sense, okay? It may not even be to that extent. Now, I'm not saying that using this board will simply open an invisible doorway. What I'm saying is it allows certain things to get a foothold. Because believe it or not, one thing that I believe is that there are demons passing through. At any given point in time, there could be one passing through, going through from house to house, looking for a target.
Right.
And if this demon sees somebody that's trying to communicate with their deceased relative, the demon is going to look at that as an opportunity.
Yes.
I can pose as their deceased relative. And that kind of, as we've talked about before, what demons do is they try to gain trust.
Right.
So they're going to inspire you to keep communicating with them as that deceased relative, and things are going to get worse and worse.
That's right.
As this demon is using this as a foothold to kind of get into your life. So it may not even be that it's opening this invisible doorway where spirits can come into our realm. It may be just that a passing demon, or a demon that may already have you in his sights, sees you trying to do this and uses it as an opportunity to manipulate you and to get involved in your life.
That's exactly right. And we're not saying that every time you use an Ouija board that it's actually going to do this, because there have been times when we used it as kids where I don't feel that anything came through. And, there were times also when we used it that it seemed like whatever did come through was sort of lying to us. And we knew that. We were smart enough to know that this was not Abraham Lincoln sitting in this small garage apartment in the village of Yorktown, trying to communicate with us. Abraham Lincoln, I don't think even stepped foot in Yorktown, ever. So, it definitely came through. Something was coming through and was lying to us. But whatever it was, didn't seem to feel it necessary to stick around or to attach itself to us. And that's very good. But if you use it enough and you use it at the wrong place at the wrong time, and nobody really knows what that time and place is, you could very well be opening up an opportunity for a demon to come through.
Right. Now, let me ask you, though. When the name Abraham Lincoln came through, were you certain that it was a spirit manipulating it, or could it have been one of your friends, their subconscious, that wasn't even aware? They were just thinking, associating Yorktown with history and thinking, oh, Abraham Lincoln's the first name that comes to mind, maybe even in their subconscious.
No, the first time that I ever used it, there were a number of people that were around and they were using it, but there was never more than 2 people. Now, this was kind of a slumber party situation when we were young. I can't say that the people I was using it with at that time were ones that I could trust to not be moving it. But the second time that I used it, I absolutely believe that the person that I was using it with was not moving the planchette by themselves. And I knew that I was not moving it. We were the only 2 people in this garage apartment. So to me, that actually said there was something there.
Right. Now, on the skeptical side, of course, you could say easily, look, if there's more than one person doing this,
Right.
even if there's one person doing this, where's your proof? And you really may not have any. You really don't have any.
Right.
Especially in the more people that get involved, the more variables you have in this experiment. Now, personally, I've never used an Ouija board, but I have seen one used on at least 2 different occasions. Okay, and when I talk about the cases that we get, I get a lot of reports about people who have used them,
Right.
but I haven't necessarily seen them use them firsthand. The one time I saw it being used, everyone was aghast at all the responses that were coming through.
Right.
And one of the guys admitted later on to actually moving it.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the second
Yeah.
time we went up to this investigation, which some of you may have seen, and was our first episode of the Paranormal Case Files. It was up in Tappahannock, Virginia. Bill Paxton's Ghost.
Is it still on private?
No, that one is public, so you can go back and watch Bill Paxton's Ghost.
Warning. This is not
warning.
something that you're
It's not
expecting to
something
see.
for the faint of heart. It
Not
really isn't. I mean, this was
exactly.
some serious activity in this house.
Yeah.
But I will say that she used the Ouija board, and I was kind of, testing because she,
Right.
she was asking questions and going to the answers. And I thought, what if I ask a question and kind of gauge the response to
Right.
see if this person was perhaps subconsciously moving it, or if it was going to give a response that was just out of left field.
Yes.
And sure enough, it did. It did give a response that was out of left field.
Right.
The name that it came up with for the middle name of one of these questions that I asked, it said Nix.
Yes.
N-I-X.
N-I-X.
And this is not a name that's commonly known.
Not
it's
at
not
all.
a name that I believe, based on my perception of the situation. I don't believe she made that up by any means.
No, I don't think she'd ever heard that name before.
No, and it was the name of a water demon, and depending on what culture you're going by.
Right. Right.
But it was interesting because
It
this
was.
name came through the Ouija board, and I was thinking, okay, that's kind of random. It's kind of out of
Yes.
left field. It's not what I was expecting.
Not at
And
all.
it made me think, is this thing really moving itself?
Yes. Now, in that situation in particular, it was interesting because the woman claimed to be impregnated by the spirit of a deceased actor. And Tappahannock, if none of you know, Tappahannock is a small waterman's community. It is right on the Chesapeake Bay, right up against the Chesapeake Bay. So you have a lot of water around that area, a lot of little inlets and canals and channels and creeks and everything. And the fact that it came up with the name Nix, and I immediately turned to David, who was with us at the time, and said, Google that name Nix, because I immediately recognized that this was not a normal name. This was not a name that was something that she would have come up with by herself. And indeed, this is what he found, that this was a water-dwelling creature or of some sort of a demon from mythology that has the ability to impregnate and to mate with the living. And we were quite surprised by that, of course. But, in that instance, there were certain things that made us believe that she was actually moving it herself, and other things that sort of made us believe, like the word Nix, that kind of made us believe that she was not moving it herself and that this was indeed something else moving the planchette.
Right. And even if you are moving it yourself, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing it on purpose.
Right.
Like I said,
Could
it
be
could very well be
subconscious.
subconscious. Subconscious is very powerful.
It is.
We don't even realize we're thinking about some things, and our hands can move into that position to
Right.
spell out those words.
Yes.
Now, some other kind of horror stories about Ouija boards and the dangers that I have seen, at least in our time here investigating the paranormal. There was one woman who used one as a teenager, and some almost 50 years later,
Right.
the house where she used it in was still having activity,
Yeah,
a lot of
still
activity
haunted.
going on. Another case, there was a guy who I saw that had the Ouija board in his car, and the planchette was all melted. And I asked him, I said, what's the story with that Ouija board? As you see, you have kind of on display in your car. And he said, well, here's the story. I was in this antique shop, and
Oh, geez.
I saw the Ouija board, and I commented on it. And the owner of the shop said, you can take that board for free. And he said,
Oh,
why?
my
He said, well,
goodness.
because this board, it moves around this shop by itself. Wherever I put it, he said, the next day I'll come in and it'll be in a completely different place. That board is haunted.
Oh,
So the guy
wow.
took it, and the
Oh,
planchette,
why
which
would you
is
do
this,
that?
which is this thick plastic, okay, especially on the older ones. It's no joke. It's not something that's going to melt in the heat of your car in the
No.
sun.
No.
So he said that planchette, literally, like when he put it in his car, it just melted. He said it was sitting in his window
Wow.
and it just started melting, like right in front of him. So it's not even that this thing was, it's not like the sun was hot enough to melt it.
Right.
That would have to be pretty hot sun
It would, yes.
to melt that. I mean, even in, what's a car get, maybe 100 and some degrees during the summer? Even in that heat,
Yes.
it's not going to melt this, because I've left plastic things in my car.
Right. It'll melt crayons and,
Right.
Certain types of
Stuff
makeup
like
and
that.
things like that.
But it's not melting a
plastic,
planchette. So it was kind of weird. It was kind of strange.
Definitely.
But it leads you to believe, of course, that there is something with these boards. Can
Right.
these boards hold energy? If somebody used this to try to contact somebody and they did tap into a spirit, could the board have an attachment itself?
Yeah.
Objects are known to be haunted.
They certainly are.
Now going back, I mentioned what spirit boxes do, right?
Right.
And how they're diagnostic. But once again, the huge difference between that and the Ouija board is you are using yourself to channel. You're inviting spirits to talk through you. You're
Right.
basically becoming the medium
Yes.
between the living and the dead. So when opening yourself up to that, you don't know what kind of spirits are going to be nearby that
That's
are going
right.
to accept that invite. And depending on the power of the mind and how open you are, how much you are able to open yourself up, some of these spirits may walk right through that barrier,
That's right.
and then they got you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do have an interesting story. And this is one of the things in my experience that kind of makes me hesitate with the Ouija boards is that during the slumber party, we were all sitting around. Of course, we were, preteen girls asking questions like, who am I going to marry? That sort of a thing. And when I asked it, the name that came through was Tim. And at the time, I only knew one Tim in my class. And I didn't really care about this kid at all. At the time, he was just some random kid in my graduating class. And so I thought, okay, that's kind of strange, and didn't think anything of it until I got to be about 15 and 8 months, about the time when I was supposed to not start dating until I was 16. But I was set up on a blind date with a local Marine, and the Marine's name happened to be Tim. Now, I ended up dating this guy for about 4 years. I was engaged to him by the time we actually split up. And I find it interesting that of all names that this thing could have come up with to say that this is a person I was going to marry, not necessarily because I did marry him, but because of the fact that it was just this name, of this person who I ended up dating so long that I became engaged to him. And I find that fascinating too, because it could have been any name that this board came up with, that this spirit came up with. And yet it came up with the name of a person that was the first person I ever dated, the first person I was ever with for any length of time, first person I ever was engaged to.
Well, that makes you wonder, what kind of spirit can see into the future?
I don't know. I mean, and they say that demons are not able to see into the future, that they can't read your mind. They're not telepathic in that sense. They're not psychic, but I've also heard some crazy stories about demons being able to predict what's going to happen or to tell you what's going to happen in the future as well. So it really makes you wonder.
Right. It absolutely does.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely does. The Ouija board. A lot of cases, countless cases that we've been to where the activity has started shortly after they used an Ouija board.
Right, yeah.
Could it be something from the darkest corners of their subconscious that's leading them to believe through power of suggestion that, hey, I used this board and now I'm on high alert and things that aren't paranormal are appearing to be paranormal and now I'm thinking my house is haunted when there's a rational explanation? Or did it really open up a doorway? One thing's for sure, at least that we believe, is there are spirits all around. And they're looking for opportunity, especially if you have something malevolent, if you have something dark, it's looking for an opportunity.
That's right.
So whether or not the Ouija board actually opens up a doorway, whether or not it actually summons spirits, one thing that I do believe it does is gives these spirits that are up to no good an opportunity to come into your life.
Absolutely.
Is it a game?
No.
I don't know.
Don't go buy one.
Don't
mess with one. Don't touch one. Don't be in the room when other people are touching them or messing with them.
That's probably not a good idea.
Don't do it.
Right.
Don't do it.
But if you're listening to our podcast, check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Virginia Paranormal. We try to post some content every week, from pub table discussions to investigations to gas scrub and ghost, where we take you on the road with us.
Yeah.
If you are watching us on YouTube, you can listen to the whole podcast on Spotify and Amazon and some various other podcasting sites, which I'm not sure what all they are, but there's quite a few of them.
Yeah.